I'd like to welcome and thank you all for joining us for this virtual kickoff for the Reimagine Public Safety Mayor's Pledge, which we are very proud to be co-sponsoring with the Obama Foundation, My Brother's Keeper Alliance, along with our partners at Cities United and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. So before we get into the heart of the program, I will share one disclaimer on behalf of the Obama Foundation. As a reminder, the Obama Foundation is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization, and the conversation today will remain nonpartisan and non-political. Please make sure to keep the conversation focused on the work, and we won't let politics sidetrack the conversation. Also, please remember that the conversation today is being recorded and your participation in the meeting indicates consent to being recorded. This event is closed to the press and it's off the record. And finally, just a note that the views expressed here are those of the presenters individually, not the Obama Foundation, John Jay College, or partner organizations. In a moment, I will turn it over to Valerie Jarret, who's the Chief Executive Officer and a member of the Board of Directors of the Barack Obama Foundation, and she will give us some opening remarks. Before I turn it over to Valerie, I just want to highlight some of the significant contributions that she's made in government and community and during her distinguished career. So in addition to her roles at the Obama Foundation, Valerie is also a senior distinguished fellow at the University of Chicago Law School. She's the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward, which was published in April of 2019. She serves on the boards of a number of companies, as well as several arts organizations. And importantly, from 2009 to 2017, she was the senior advisor to President Barack Obama, which made her the longest serving senior advisor to a president in history. She oversaw the offices of public engagement and intergovernmental affairs, and she chaired the White House Council on Women and Girls. She received her BA from Stanford and her JD from the University of Michigan Law School. So without further delay, I will now turn it over to Valerie for a few opening remarks. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you for your leadership on this very important initiative. On behalf of the Obama Foundation, I want to welcome everybody to our launch of Reimagining Public Safety. As many of you know, My Brother's Keeper began 9 years ago after the killing of Trayvon Martin. And President Obama said we should all do soul searching to figure out what can we do to improve the trajectory of the lives of boys and young men of color. And since that time, the My Brother's Keeper Alliance has been committed to doing just that. And our approach is from cradle to career and help our young boys and men of color achieve in 6 critical evidence-based milestones. And they are as number 1, entering school ready to learn. Number 2, reading at grade level by 3rd grade. Number 3, graduating from high school, ready for college and career. Number 4, completing post-secondary education or training. Number 5, successfully entering the workforce. And number 6, reducing exposure to gun violence. We know that this work takes courageous, consistent, and collective effort. And today we're going to focus on milestone 6, reducing violence in our communities, because we know everyone deserves to feel safe and secure as they navigate their daily lives. How did we get here? In 2020, in the aftermath of the horrific murder of George Floyd and the tremendous awakening around our country, demonstrations here and all over the world, President Obama charged us to launch the Reimagining Policing Pledge, to review the reforms and the use of force at the local level. Over 300 mayors and local officials across the country took our pledge to look at how we combat racism within law enforcement, and that work continues today, community by community. The natural step in our collective work is the Reimagining Public Safety Pledge. And so last month, we launched our pledge. The Obama Foundation is so proud to support this effort. And the pledge, as you all know, is a project led by John Jay College of Criminal Justice in partnership with Cities United and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Reimagining Public Safety Pledge is a call for mayors and local officials to focus on community-driven investments that improve public safety for all. And I appreciate everyone's time and community here together. A special shout out to my dear friend, Karol Mason. Karol and I went to law school together more years ago than I intend to disclose to you right now. And we walk along the river every morning we can in New York. And this is what we talk about. What are we going to do to make our community safer for everyone? What are we going to do to create a bond of trust between police and the Black community in particular? And what are we going to do to see a collective action where we can hold up best practices, share those best practices, and strengthen our country in ways we all know need to happen? So I want to begin, as I started, by thanking everyone who is participating. We're counting on you on this call to spread the word, to get more and more cities and towns engaged, to get local elected officials willing to work hand in hand with community-based leaders, with the business community, with civic leaders, all designed to improve the safety of our communities. And let's reimagine that effort together. Back to you, Erica. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Valerie, for those remarks and all that you're doing at the Obama Foundation to support boys and young men of color, as well as community safety broadly. We'll now share a brief video that features two individuals who are leading on public safety in their communities. Mayor Sharon Weston Broome from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Chief Chad Kasmar from Tucson, Arizona. They will provide an overview of the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge and how the work that they're doing in Baton Rouge and Tucson aligns with the pledge.
The Reimagine Public Safety Pledge, hosted by the John Jay College, calls on local officials who are uniquely positioned to implement and fund community-driven public safety strategies.
This pledge recognizes the urgent need to address violence and crime in our communities, and to do so in a way that is equitable and just for all. As a city, we've seen the devastating impact of violence and crime on our residents. We know that this is not a problem that can be solved by law enforcement alone. We must engage community partners and empower our residents to address violence and crime in their neighborhoods.
Number 1, empowering communities to address violence. Number 2, investing in off-ramps from the criminal legal system. And number 3, investing in community and well-being to prevent violence and crime.
That's why Baton Rouge is committed to investing in public safety strategies and programs that engage the whole community. We believe that this approach will help us address violence and crime and heal our communities.
Safe communities requires investment and innovation. It also requires activation of the community to be part of the solution. The challenges that we face in our country when we think about mental health disorders and substance misuse disorders far expand existing capabilities of our legal systems. In the city of Tucson, our 911 partners triage over 1,000 mental health crisis calls a month that would have traditionally gone to a police officer or a firefighter, instead now go to mental health trained professionals.
We will invest in off-ramps from the criminal legal system by providing opportunities for individuals to turn their lives around. We also recognize the importance of investing in community health and well-being to prevent violence and crime from happening in the first place. This means investing in education, job training, affordable housing, and mental health services. We believe that by addressing the root causes of violence and crime, we can create a safer and more prosperous community for all.
A safe community is everyone's responsibility.
Let's work together to create a community where everyone feels safe, valued, and supported.
I'd just like to thank Mayor Weston Broome and Chief Kasmar for their engagement with the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge. For participants in today's webinar, we will post a link in the chat so that you can access the website where we have more information about the pledge and an opportunity to sign up for the pledge. So as you saw from the video, the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge calls on local officials who are uniquely positioned to fund and implement community-driven public safety strategies to sign up for the pledge and partner with us to highlight the important work that is being done around the country to keep communities safe. The pledge really seeks to encourage three kinds of public safety investments and programs. First, it incentivizes programs that empower communities to address violence, including by investing in community violence intervention programs and establishing offices of neighborhood safety that can help fund and coordinate important public safety work across government and across communities. Second, it seeks to reward efforts to create off-ramps from the criminal legal system, including programs and services that address the underlying reasons that people come into contact with police and the legal system, programs like Seattle's LEAD program and Atlanta's Policing Alternatives and Diversion program that divert people from arrest and incarceration to needed mental health services, substance misuse treatment, and supportive housing. And finally, we're calling on mayors to invest in prevention, strategies that effectively prevent crime and violence. So this includes investments in programs where there's strong evidence for public safety improvements, such as youth employment programs and blight remediation efforts. It also includes investments that promote community healing, such as racial reconciliation between law enforcement and the communities they serve. And it can include many other things, and we are really excited to work with communities around the country to talk about the pledge and to think about how communities and mayors can really engage more deeply with their communities to identify and implement public safety solutions. We know that the reimagining public safety work is difficult work for mayors, local government, and community partners. And that's why for mayors that sign the pledge, we're offering 6 workshops over the course of the next year. And we will bring you through these workshops, leading experts from around the country that will share research, best practices, and lessons learned. The Reimagine Public Safety Pledge partners will also share resource materials that can assist you and your communities in comprehensive public safety planning. Another resource for mayors and their communities is the upcoming Safe and Just Community Summit, which we invite you to attend on May 8th and 9th at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. The summit will cover a wide range of public safety topics with panels organized around 4 characteristics of safe communities, communities that are resourced, healthy, just, and restored. We will have speakers from around the country, including elected officials and leaders from the federal government, including Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta and Amy Solomon, the head of the Office of Justice Programs within the Department of Justice. We will have a roundtable of mayors from around the country who will be in conversation with ABC News anchor Lindsay Davis. And we will also have speakers from government, nonprofits, and the advocacy world, including from organizations like the Vera Institute, Everytown for Gun Safety, Cities United, the Aspen Institute, Arnold Ventures, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the Black Law Enforcement Alliance, and the Center for Justice Innovation, among many others. We will share a link to the registration in the chat, and we'll also send a follow-up to this webinar with more information about both the pledge as well as the conference in May. So now that you know a little bit about the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge, I'd like to introduce you to our 3 fantastic speakers, each of whom has years of experience working in government, nonprofits, and the private sector to create those resourced, just, healthy, and restored communities. First, we have Karol Mason, who's the president of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And over the course of her long career, the president has been a legal pioneer and an exceptional voice for equality, fairness, and criminal justice reform. She previously served as United States Attorney General and head of the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs. In her distinguished career at Alston and Bird, she was the first African-American woman elected as chair of the management committee at any major national firm. Welcome, Karol. We also have Maya Wiley, who's the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. She is a nationally respected civil rights attorney and activist who has dedicated her life to fights for justice, equality, and fairness. Maya served as the first Black woman counsel to the mayor of New York City and helped deliver on civil and immigrant rights. She then served as a faculty member and senior vice president for social justice at the New School University. While there, she also chaired the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. Her tenure at the CCRB was marked by increased case closure rates, increased transparency, and an intense focus on public outreach so that potential victims of police abuse were aware of ways to seek the board's assistance. Early in her career, Maya worked at the ACLU and NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, where she focused on multiple racial justice issues. She also worked in the civil division of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Welcome, Maya. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we've got Anthony Smith, who's the executive director of Cities United, which is a national network focused on eliminating violence in American cities related to African-American men and boys. Cities United was launched in 2011. And prior to joining Cities United, Smith was the director of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Program in the office of Louisville, Kentucky Mayor Greg Fisher. Anthony worked with city departments, community and faith-based organizations, community members, and civic and business leaders to develop prevention strategies to reduce violent crime and create better outcomes for the most impacted communities. Anthony has more than 20 years of experience working with civic and political leaders, organizing, facilitating, managing, mobilizing, and building networks to create community change. Thank you, Anthony. So with that, we will jump right in with a number of questions, and I have invited all of the panelists to please engage with each other and respond and have a conversation, because I think there's a lot that our participants can learn from each of you today. So my first question is really about resources. So for mayors and communities that are engaged in the pledge, we want to make sure that we're giving them as much information and support as we possibly can. And each of the organizations that's here today has resources that can be helpful with this work. So every day, mayors and their communities are working together to deal with the aftershocks of a global pandemic, including spikes in violence in some communities across the country. And mayors in their communities continue to struggle with concerns about quality of life, lack of housing, mental health, and substance misuse services. And on top of that, they face challenges with policing that range from an inability to hire police for their departments to concerning incidents of police violence that have strained relationships between police and many communities. And so each of your organizations in its own way is working to respond to these challenges. So as mayors embark on the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge, what are the kinds of resources and ideas that each of you and your organizations can offer them in their communities? And I will start with Anthony.
So I knew you was coming to me, Erica, since you introduced me last, so I knew it was on me. So good to see you and good to be in conversation. And I think it's such a timely conversation for where we are as a country, as you talked about the uptick in violence and especially among our young people. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I tell folks, I use this number on the regular. Last year, we had 166 homicides, I believe that was the number. And of those, there were 60 young people under the age of 18. And of that 60, there were 58 young Black men. So this is the time for us to have this conversation and for us to move with a sense of urgency, not only to reimagine, but redefine and then reinvest in public safety to really keep all of our communities safe and healthy. So as mayors embark on this Reimagine Public Safety Pledge, the thing for me, for them to remember is that their most valuable asset and their most valuable resource is their communities, especially the communities that have been carrying the burden of our current public safety infrastructure for so many years. So making sure that you are reaching out to your community members, especially those in Black and brown and poor communities who have been dreaming of a new form of public safety for generations. Those are the folks who we go to first, right? And at Cities United, all of our resources are really designed to help mayors not only identify, but engage and support those who are most at risk. We created a Reimagine the Public Safety Framework in 2020 that really outlines 15 areas where we think mayors should really be paying attention and really invest in the resources to really have a new vision for public safety that is for all and justice, and create a space for everybody to be at the table. But also we have a roadmap. As you talked about the comprehensive plan, we think every city should have a comprehensive plan that creates safe and healthy communities for young Black men and boys and their families. And that plan should have a vision for that community for the next 5 to 10 years that really talks about how do we create safe, healthy, and hopeful communities. And it's not around violence reduction or crime reduction, but it really is about a vision of what we want to see for our young people. So we have a roadmap to safe, healthy, and hopeful communities that mayors and their teams can download, call our team to talk about. And last thing I'll bring here before I turn it over is that we've also created what we call a Roadmap Academy, for where we take in 12 cities each year in an intensive year-long engagement where we really help them walk through the process of creating their comprehensive plan, but also helping them design an implementation strategy, an evaluation strategy, and a sustainability. Across the country, we're good at putting plans together. It's the execution of those plans and the evaluation of those plans that matter, because so many things change over the years. So you want to make sure that you're going back to that plan over and over again. But just making sure that they spend time with community, especially those communities who are most impacted by the issues that we're talking about, I think would be the first thing. But going on Cities United's website to download those resources and reaching out to us is another way for us to be engaged too.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate those thoughts about engaging with community. And as someone who had an opportunity to attend one of your sessions of the Roadmap Academy, I would definitely recommend it. It was really incredible to kind of see the level of engagement from communities that have been doing this work for a while and brought their whole teams to really spend some time thinking about where are we with respect to our public safety work and where else do we need to go. And I think it creates an important space for those conversations and really to share learnings across the country. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll make sure that all of the resources that Anthony mentioned get up onto our website so that folks, when you go visit the Reimagine Public Safety website, you'll have all of that information there as well. So thank you. Next, I will turn to my boss, President Karol Mason.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it is wonderful to work with this team. I think that what you'll hear in this conversation is that we aren't just partnering together on MBK, we work together all the time. So I am grateful to be partners with Cities United and the Leadership Conference, the Lawyers Committee. And we do this work in partnership. And so Anthony mentioned his roadmap. After George Floyd was murdered, John Jay, in partnership with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, held a series of 6 conversations to focus on what's the future of public safety. The conversation was around policing, but I felt very strongly the conversation needs to be much broader than policing. And one of the powerful things about this particular pledge is that we're focusing on what the community can do and the community's partnership and leadership in creating safe communities. And then we think about what's the role of policing in that framework. So we had a series of 6 curated conversations with 38 people from all across the country in law enforcement, advocacy, philanthropy, and came up with 9 common principles of what leads to safe communities. And that roadmap, just as Anthony talked about, there are lots of models for roadmaps and a process for getting to safe communities. And we're going to put in the chat a link to our future public safety report. But again, what we found out is there are 9 points of consensus that everybody agrees on. And the main thing is we all want to live in thriving, healthy communities. And that's what this work that we're doing together with you all through the pledge will help you do. One of the things that we encourage people to do in terms of being able to track and assess how successful their programs are is to evaluate them. And at John Jay, we have a resource in our Research and Evaluation Center that we're happy to make available to folks who take this pledge to work with you on the front end in developing metrics to figure out whether what you're doing is working, how it's working, how to improve it. And what we want to do is encourage you to work with your local, all of you all have colleges and universities in your communities, how to partner with them to be able to help assess the success of what you're doing. We also have an Institute for Innovation and Prosecution. If your prosecutors in your areas need some guidance about how to be better partners in this work with everyone to create these safer communities, we have that available as well. And as what started as a police college, we talked about a lot of communities having trouble recruiting officers. Come to John Jay. because we are educating officers who want to be partners with their communities and understand the new framework we're trying to reimagine, redefine, as Anthony said, what does public safety look like? And that means being in partnership with the community and having community-led approaches to public safety. So I will pass it back to Maya now.
Well, thank you. And I have to start by saying it's a real pleasure to be on this Zoom, both with our partners with the Leadership Conference. Have been really privileged to have the partnership we've had with everyone you've just heard from, Obama Foundation, Cities United, and John Jay. But I also have to say special shout out to my friend Erica, because we actually got to work together on some of these issues in City Hall in New York City. Let me just say a few things about the Leadership Conference, just to put who we are in context to all the incredible work you've already heard about. I mean, we are a national organization, not a local one. The Leadership Conference Education Fund is our C3. We also have a C4 and are a coalition of over 230 national organizations committed to civil rights, everything from almost every racial group. We literally have multi-sectors because we have service providers, we have unions, we have civil rights legal institutions. We also have people who fight for gun safety and against gun violence. So we really have a map of relationships, both from a membership standpoint, but also for the work we do in relationship to leaders, including other national leaders and local leaders. So some examples, because we do pay a lot of attention to national policy, as well as how we can better support local innovation, is to produce tools and sometimes also aggregating what many have also done so that they're one-stop shops. So for example, we are about to put out something that we will make sure you know about when it's out, called Vision for Justice, which is really a very, very comprehensive list of a whole range of things that people can do that are completely consistent with all the things you've already heard about that are in the pledge, and including some that some localities have already done and others are looking at. But it covers everything from all the different kinds of prevention to how to use discretionary power, whether it's prosecutors, whether it's police departments, and also on accountability, which, as we know and as we think of, as we're looking at not just this pledge and its importance, but how we connect prevention and policing, because as we know, and particularly in communities of color, there is a way to engage community in that first pillar, community engagements on making communities safer that also include police accountability. And I can talk a little bit about some examples of that, but the Vision for Justice has that, and that is not out yet, but will be soon. But New Era, a public safety report and a toolkit that accompanies it for comprehensive recommendations for police departments, and including how to support communities that want to organize around more accountability on police departments. And we also have something called Accountable Now, which is a database, and it's modeling both for federal government, how to have and track excessive force in police departments, but also is a tool that localities can use to better track and see other examples of definitions of excessive force, because public safety happens with prevention, and public safety also happens when we're preventing excessive force and police violence. And the communities we work with look for both. And we partner with local communities and local organizing groups that are looking to advance strategies for public safety from a policy standpoint, and stand absolutely available to share that. But as I said, these partnerships, John Jay, Cities United, the Obama Foundation, are critical partners and thought leaders in that as well. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Maya. And thank you, each of you, for sharing all of these resources that I think are a great starting place, particularly for communities that are just starting to think about the sort of comprehensive public safety planning that Anthony mentioned. I think they're also good resources for identifying other communities that maybe have tried some of these strategies and have lessons learned that can then be shared. So some of the goal of the pledge is, of course, to share the information we have, but also to create a community of practice so that mayors, across the country can engage with each other and think about, what's working, what's not, and can try to improve on the existing strategies. So there's been a lot of talk already about partners, and I heard policing, I heard communities, I heard all of our organizations working with local academics and researchers. So I wanted to just take a little time to flesh out who are community partners. What does that mean, right? Community is a big, broad word. It can mean a lot of things. And so when we talk about really addressing particularly violence in your community, who really needs to be at the table in order to ensure that the right ideas are getting out there and then that they're being implemented successfully. And so I'm sorry, Anthony, but I'm going to call on you first again, because you did talk about community being such a crucial partner. And I wanted to go into a little more detail about what that means, who those partners are, and kind of how you go about doing that work. So I'll kick things off with you.
No, thank you. Really appreciate that. And I think this is like one of the key things. And, you heard Maya talk about the national partnerships that help move the work. We believe the same thing needs to happen at the city level, right? City tables need to be as broad as possible and open as possible. But I think the main folks who need to be at that table are the young men and women who are most impacted and their families, right? So you've got to create that space, and they've got to be there from the beginning and throughout the conversation. And I think one of the things we've got to be clear about is both sides of the gun, right? You got to have folks who have pulled the trigger and folks who have been shot helping us guide this work, because we got to create room for redemption and for folks to be restored and be back into the conversation. But I think also when you think about this approach to this work, city government should understand it's all of government, right? So every department should be a part of that conversation and should be at that table. Every business leader should be a part of that conversation. Every educational system that you have in place should be a part of the conversation, every philanthropy. So you really want to bring all of your people to the table. I think one of the struggles that a lot of cities have is that mayors start the initiative, but forget to engage their legislators, like their council members and other folks inside the conversation, forget to bring in their state representatives and their federal representatives. Because I think, again, if you're thinking about a comprehensive strategy, that means you have the biggest table as possible. Everybody has a role, and you kind of help define what those roles are. But I think you can also create a space where there's chairs, right? When we ran the work here in Louisville, Kentucky, the mayor had an executive team that he talked to on the regular that included CEOs from different places who helped us when we got stuck, and the work moved the work forward. And then there's another layer of folks who actually get the work done, who can come to the table and really strategize and partner together and really move the work. And then we also created space for young folks to come and inform the work. Created a space for them to be by themselves, but also included them into the conversation at all the different tables. So again, when you think about this who needs to be at the table, I can't think of who does not need to be. So how do you create enough space for everybody to feel a part of the conversation? Last week in Louisville, we had 2 mass shootings and then a lot of other shootings throughout. The whole community is having conversations. We're having prayer visuals at different houses of faith. So all of these things are happening. So how do you bring all of those people into this conversation so that we can all care about those who are most at risk? Because I think too many times we leave it just to those communities and just to those families, when this should be about all of us. So how do you bring all of government, all of community to a table? And we believe that mayors and other city leaders have like this convenient power who can bring all of those folks to the table, give them a big vision, so everybody can find themselves in it. So for me, partnership is unlimited and has many, many places for a lot of people to be a part of it. But start with those most impacted and then build from there as the way we think about the partnerships and who needs to be at the table.
Thank you, Anthony. Maya.
Still in that COVID verse where it takes a long time to unmute. But really, I just want to be in Anthony's amen corner. I think all of that was dead on. I'll just add a couple things because I think Anthony said it so well. I mean, one is that that table has to be a real table. And what I mean by that is it can't be, and I've seen this work in well and work badly. When it works well, it's a recognition that that table is a real table of peers and that everyone has a voice and that it's a table that's not just going to dissipate after a conversation. And it's a table where there's going to be real interrogation of the perspectives that people are bringing, but also bringing the data and information necessary to inform it well. Because you can only have, whether it's an all of government response that is really reflective of the experiences of people and people's ability to say to government what works and what doesn't, unless it's also informed. And so often, and we've seen it particularly in police and community relationships, where it's the police, the conversation becomes, we just want you to trust us. So we want to figure out how you can trust us more so that when we come to you, you'll trust us and give us the information we need. That's a one-way street, not a two-way street. So making it a two-way street is when I was chairing Civilian Complaint Review Board oversight with police misconduct. We decided to use our role as a convening role for our meetings where we took them into community. But we asked the precinct commanders and their staffs to attend to listen. And we provided our data up front at the beginning of the meeting about what we were seeing in data of complaints from the precinct district. And then we allowed community members to say what they were experiencing. And then we asked the police to respond rather than asking the police just to give a presentation and ask people for help and support. Now that's not perfect, but I just say it's a different orientation than what government usually does. And it matters. And seeing it as a long-term matters as well and not a once-off. The other one I'll say, which is very specific as a model, but it is an example of what that kind of table can produce, which is in East New York, in Brooklyn, a very dangerous corridor, some of the highest rates of violence, Black community. And the community organized and said, and this is pillar number one on the community and safety, said to the police precinct commander, step back. We need you to step off these 2 blocks and we'll call you if we need you. And there was a 2-week period, and what they were doing was violence interruption. They were bringing social work. They were doing community mediation. They were understanding where and how violence jumps off and stopping it before it happened. And that included multiple stakeholders from those 2 blocks, including local electeds and state level electeds. But it was the community reported that as the safest they had ever felt in that 2-week period. But the police precinct commander was willing to listen and not just say, give us the information you have about whoever did the shooting, but actually listen and said, okay, let's talk about how we communicate in case you need us, how we come in when we come in. And it worked. Now, the problem was it didn't last because the police commander changed. So the other thing to note is where we have these successes, making sure that government is looking at the ways it institutionalizes them. So you can't just listen to community, do a pilot, and then not figure out the implementation that becomes institutionalization of what works. And that's part of the reason it has to be an ongoing table and not a time-limited table.
Thank you. So what go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Please.
So I just want to add to that. I think I appreciate that, Maya. And I think that table's got to be co-owned and co-led, right? So making sure that it's just not the city leading the work, but they're co-leading it with partners, I think is important. And the last piece I think that was so important is the interrogation, that accountability part. Because if folks at the table ain't doing what they're supposed to do, then you got to figure out how to move them or do a corrective action plan or whatever. Because I think that piece of it holds us all accountable. So this table's got to be self-accountable to each other and to the community. But we've got to be willing to say to those folks who have been at the table too long, who are not moving in the same direction, it's time to go. So I just wanted to add those couple of points. I just think to Maya, just to pinpoint some of the stuff that Maya said, is really, really important for those tables to be successful.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. So really what I'm hearing here is that we need the right partners at the table, but we also need to ensure that that table is one that's empowered, right? Where there's really an ability to move on these issues. This is not performative in any way, and that there's data that can hopefully help to move a conversation that otherwise might get stuck, right? But when you're bringing people around the table using data that gives a shared understanding of what's going on, and a starting place for these conversations about public safety. So really appreciate those comments. And we've already started to talk now a little bit about what are some of the models, what are some of the best practices, including here in New York, that folks might want to consider. So I want to delve into that a little bit more, because the first element of the Reimagine Public Safety Pledge is calling on mayors to establish programs, policies, offices, importantly, to think about budgets that actually enable community partners to actively contribute to reducing violence and promoting safety in their own neighborhoods. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what some of the examples are of how mayors and their teams have gone about really partnering deeply on public safety planning and or implementation. So mayors can walk away from this and their teams and their communities that are attending today with some ideas around kind of proven best practices as they go about this work. So for this one, I'll turn it over to Karol first.
Thank you. And it's a nice segue to this conversation from what Maya and Anthony were both talking about, particularly about trust. And I think in building trust, and you can't just say, trust me, you've got to earn it. And it's hard to earn and easy to lose. And so that's why being consistent and figuring out how to institutionalize this work is important. So our neighbor here, I'm in New York City right now, and our neighbor in Newark has really done some wonderful, fascinating things under the leadership of Mayor Baraka, who was also instrumental in the work that the National League of Cities has been doing. He co-chaired their reimagining public safety work as well. There's a theme that we all have about reimagining, redefining, re-visioning. And so one of the things he's done in terms of thinking about whose role it is to have safe communities, he created an Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. And again, institutionalizing that work and telling the community, we're serious about this, serious enough that we've created an office, staffed it with full-time people who have benefits, because I think that's a key word. You know, when we look at hiring people to be credible messengers, violence interrupters, we've got to professionalize it and show that they are in the budget permanently, not just episodically when there's a crisis, because we learned with George Floyd, most of us knew that it was a fleeting moment, but I had hoped that we would be institutionalizing and dealing with the foundational issues. The time has passed, but we've got to stay committed to this work long-term. And that's how you keep it sustainable and institutionalized. And the community, having the community lead this work is key, because that's how you institutionalize it beyond whoever happens to be the mayor at the time. So what Newark has also done is for every 10 police officers they hire, they've committed to hire a social worker. And they're using these partnerships and these relationships to approach public safety differently, community issues differently. They've established the Brick City Peace Collective, which brings together diverse stakeholders on public safety issues. So you have community organizers, you have the school board, you have public safety folks, policy makers. There's a theme. You got to have everybody at the table and staying at the table and creating a framework for them to do that. We also have some examples in Tucson where they're using care coordinators to help with addressing 911 calls, so that not just the call itself, but there's follow-up after the call to connect people with social services. And I think that's the thing that people need to be thinking about again is, what's the long-term solution? Social workers can help with that, care coordinators, but having a framework where people understand that the city, the community is invested in the community's health and success. So there are lots of frameworks around this. I'm going to pass it to Anthony now because I'm watching our time and knowing that I've got to talk faster.
Appreciate that, Karol. And I'll try to be quick because I think, again, the resources that we put in the box will help people find models and best practices. But I think, as we've said over and over again, these models and best practices only work when they're part of a comprehensive strategy, when they're working in partnership, when you just don't have like a CVI organization doing violence interruption, but you have them a part of a bigger strategy, I think is where we really win. And I also want to just be real clear that, you know, as a country, we have just truly started investing in CBI and the work that we know this community models. So really want to thank the current administration for elevating the work and really putting resources, but then also, giving people space to use ARPA dollars and other resources to really help people build out their strategies. So I think there's a lot of best practices and a lot of models, but just have not truly been invested in the way they are now. So we want to make sure that folks give people time to really do this work and execute this work and not get frustrated because it's going to take us a minute to get to where we're trying to get to. So to say all of that, I just want to highlight a couple of cities real quick that really help, that are doing good work and really investing in the way. Mayor Broome, who showed up earlier, has a strategy that she calls Safe, Hopeful, and Healthy. She's been working that strategy for the last 3 years and is starting to see results. She was able to see some reductions in homicides and shootings from year to year, from last year to this year. And then also at the beginning of this year, she saw some reductions as she looked from like where she was last year in February to where she was this year. So really thinking about this ideal of creating, she partnered with one of our partners at the community-based public safety collective and created a street team like they did in Newark. So I'm glad that Karol mentioned Newark. And they really are out working with community, thinking about long-term, looking at policies, looking at budgets, and really thinking about how they invest. I also think Mayor Scott in Baltimore is doing some amazing work with his investments, and where they've been truly investing, they're seeing results and are looking to expand beyond that. And again, I think it's not just what we invest in community, it's also how we rearrange city government to address the issue in partnership with that. Lastly, I'll elevate Philadelphia. I know Philadelphia folks look at their numbers and don't really pay attention to Mayor Kenny's investment that he's did. He put a lot of resources into community-based organizations and was really clear with an equity lens around how do we support some of these small organizations and help them build their capacity so that they can do more. And I think that's one of the things we got to continue to push communities to think about the investment in these organizations who are on the ground, who've been on the ground, who will continue to be on the ground no matter what we talk about, because this is what they do and what they care about deeply. So I think if you think about those 3 cities, their investment into the work, but then also how they have thought about changing government structures and thinking about how they support the CVI ecosystem and others, I think has been really, really key as the work has been moving forward.
And I just want to add one thing to what Anthony said. It's a long, seeing the results, you have to have a long-term perspective, because we didn't get into these problems overnight. We're not going to get out of them overnight. And so socializing people to understand that metrics of success take a while to see them, but we've got to keep the commitment and the focus on it, again, beyond election cycles. And that's where the community voice is critical, because the community is always going to be there. And if they keep demanding from their electeds and governments that this focus on investing so that you can create safe communities and have safe communities, that's what we need to make sure that we do. And that's why this pledge is designed to focus on community-led efforts for public safety.
So community-based violence intervention has now come up several times. And I've had a lot of conversations with Jeff Butts here, who runs our Research and Evaluation Center, about, what does that mean, right? Because that term is now being used by the federal government. There have been heavy investments. And I think there is clearly a lot of work that needs to be done to institutionalize the kinds of programs that fit under that banner. But I appreciate that this is kind of an emerging field, though the work has been done for a long time. And so one of the things that we're going to do through the pledge is we will have a webinar specifically on CVI work so that we can go into more depth about what does that mean? What does it look like when it's successful? How do we think about these issues around professionalization? Because I think we need to move beyond just sort of giving money to community groups and hoping that, results will be produced, and really think about how are we supporting this work and sustaining it over time. And so we'll carve out some time for that as part of the webinar series to come. But I just wanted to flag that for folks that might be kind of new to this terminology.
Erica,
please.
I'm sorry, just real quick. There's a couple of places where folks can look to as well, right? Peace for DC, I think is what it's called, has created an institute in DC where they're training workers and really giving them the professionalization that you're talking about, making sure that they have the support that they need, making sure that they are more connected, and then also making sure that they're a part of that bigger ecosystem, making sure that they they understand their mental health, take time for wellness and all of that stuff like that. So I think there's a lot happening. And as part of the Black and Brown Peace Consortium, we're also working with the University of Chicago to create a CBI Institute, where we're going to take 15 to 30 CBI leaders across the country each year to help them think about their capacity and their infrastructure and things like that. So there's things bubbling up that I think people should be paying attention to. But I think every city should look at these Peace for DC and really figure out how to create an infrastructure like that. Because it's one of those things that, again, if you don't bring all these folks under the table at the same time and help them work in partnership together, they'll always feel like they're on their own. The work will always feel overwhelming, and it'll always feel like there's not enough of us, which there's not right now, but there's more than what we think. And I think having those umbrellas, I think, are going to be key and important to the work.
And I know you're trying to move this along, but one last thing to point that I want the audience to hear is the collaboration. That's important. You don't have to do it yourself. And if you don't know where to find it, you can call Anthony, you can call Erica, you can call me, you can call Maya, and we know about who's doing it and can connect you with the right people. And that's what this pledge is designed to do, is to give you those resources and connect you with the right people. But I love that you're thinking about how to professionalize and institutionalize this so that people respect this work the way they should.
So I'm keeping an eye on time. We've got about 6 minutes left, and I'm going to focus on two things. One is I want to talk a little bit more about prevention and root causes, because that is really ultimately, I think, where we need to be investing our resources so that we're not responding to these incidents of violence and we're actually preventing them from happening in the first place. And we actually know a little bit about how we can do that work. And so I think that's important guidance that we can share and will be a continued theme throughout the pledge. So I wanted to actually, Karol, ask you if you could talk a little bit about what the kinds of policies and programs and investments are that you think are really integral for building safer and stronger neighborhoods, so that we don't have to hear about these or experience these horrific incidents of violence in our communities.
So Anthony mentioned this earlier on. We already know what to do. The question is whether we have the will and the commitment to do it. And we've got the resources to do it. We just need to think about how do we align the resources with the right things. And so I would also encourage people to look at the piece that the Washington Post did probably 18 months ago about Reimagine Public Safety. And they had a lot of really good information, and it's better to see it online because the depth of things you have to link to here and there. But they talked about, we know the things that are critical are quality housing, education, jobs for young people, green spaces. There's lots of research showing that creating vibrant green spaces change communities. Because, giving our young people and everybody a safe and enjoyable place to congregate, just enjoy is essential elements of safe communities. And I know you're going to get to this later, but when you think about what you need, think about where you live or want to live. And that's the kind of investment we need to be making in order to have safe communities. So, housing, job creation, healthcare, mental health support. These are investments that I think are critical to creating safe, thriving, healthy communities.
So that's actually, I think, a great segue into how I want to close this out, which is talking about what is that big vision for the future of public safety that I know each of you are working towards and that communities are working towards across the country. This work is, as I said earlier, is not easy. It's easy to get lost in kind of the day-to-day grind of organizing folks and moving reform. And so I think it is really important that we have a vision for where we're trying to go and what we're trying to achieve. And so I just wanted to ask each of you, when you think about the future of public safety in your community, how do you describe that? What is that safe community, that healthy and hopeful community look and feel like as mayors go about doing this work? How should they be projecting that vision? Maya, I'll start with you. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I feel like but both Karol and Anthony have laid it out so well. So I'll summarize it with a sentence and then suggest a few specifics. It's a community where everyone in it has and gets what they need, because that's prevention. When that happens, there isn't high rate of crime or violence, and there is safety. But I think what that it means, and I just want to name some specifics that we haven't talked enough about just because we're running out of time. And I'll give a couple of concrete examples. Schools, I mean, so Karol talked about education, schools, we need to have schools focused on trauma-informed care, and it should be in the schools. Because so much of what we see, both from victimization to activity where kids are starting to get in trouble, are frankly because of problems that aren't being addressed and solved, that are mental health, that are social workers. I mean, and the second is when we talk about community engagement is how we're seeing the interventions that do not require law enforcement. And I say that because, so often, just like we say we shouldn't expect teachers to be able to solve every social ill in the schools, why would we expect police officers to? That makes no sense. And so whole communities are ones where everyone has what they need, but where that means what we're saying is that the only time someone's being called in is because there is something we couldn't prevent. And that means a budget that is oriented around prevention and around support and understanding that absolutely.
Oops, she froze.
It looks like Maya may have frozen, so I'm going to ask her to hold that thought if she can hear us. And then I'll turn it over to Anthony to pick things up, and then hopefully Maya will be able to rejoin us. And if not, we'll close things out because we are coming up on time. Anthony, please. Oh, she's back.
Yeah.
Maya, do you want to finish that thought?
I don't know where I got cut off. I just closed down on
I
you.
mean, that was a big point. It was great. I want to hear it.
Or I think what I was saying was we have to have budgets that are focused on prevention, meaning by which I mean focused on people getting what they need, because that does become a public safety budget. And that is a change in how we think about it, not just because we can do it, to Karol's point.
Thank you. Anthony, please take us home.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add. I think our vision for Cities United is around safe, healthy, and hopeful. And I think, Maya just explained exactly what that looks like and what it feels like. I think for me, and when we think about who's most impacted, I just want to see young Black men and boys feeling hopeful about their future and seeing themselves in the future and seeing themselves in the cities and the country that they live in, which means that's what public safety, if we get this right, that's what it will look like for me.
Can I add one quick thing?
Sure.
So we have a convening that's in person and will be live stream on May 8th and 9th. The theme of which is Safe and Just Community Summit. And the 4 principles that it's organized around are resourced, just, healthy, and restored communities. So I think that if we have those 4 things, we will have safe communities and, again, community-led approaches to this work.
Thank you, Karol. So we're just a bit over time. I just would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Maya and Anthony and Karol. You are all very busy, and we appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate all the work that you're doing to actually make communities safer across the country. I want to thank all of our participants, including our mayors and their community partners, for joining us. Valerie, Jarret for opening us up for this program. And I just want to say this is the beginning of a conversation. So we talked about a lot of different things today, but the goal here, as I said earlier on, is to create a community of practice and really to provide resources to folks that want to urgently deal with questions of violence and public safety. And that really should be everybody. So please go to the website for mayors. Please sign up for the pledge. There's an email on the website. If there are questions, we are happy to answer them, and we want to really be engaged with all of you. We will put up additional information about the webinars on that site, as well as many of the resources that we talked about today. So thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon.